You've got a remote, windswept group of islands, a forgotten plaque, and a whole lot of penguins. Sounds kind of random, right? Well, these are actually the ingredients for a war that sent two nations head to head thousands of miles from home. Today, we're going to unravel the story of the Falklands conflict. So let's kick things off with the British. Picture this. It's the late 1600s, explorers land on these islands, and their first impression? Cold, wet, and miserable. But here's the funny part. They followed it up with, just like home. I guess that bleakness made them feel strangely comfortable. All right, so in 1765, the British decide, you know what? Let's make this official, and they set up a colony. But there was a problem, a big one. They had absolutely no idea that the French had done the exact same thing just the year before on another island right nearby. You can already see where this is going, right? A classic territorial showdown was brewing. So you've got this super tense standoff. But before Britain and France could even figure out who was going to blink first, a whole new player enters the game. Spain shows up, and they're waving around this old document that they claim gives them dibs on, well, pretty much the whole region. And this is where it gets really interesting, because you're looking at a clash of two totally different ways of thinking. Spain's argument was basically, hey, back in the 1400s, the Pope drew a line on a map and gave us this entire half of the world. Seriously. Britain, on the other hand, was like, yeah, no, we found it, we settled it, it's ours. It's old world decree versus modern finders keepers. Now, at first, Spain had the advantage. They had more guns in the area, so they basically just kicked the British out. But here's the thing. Britain was ready to go to a full-scale war over these little islands, and Spain wasn't so sure they could win that fight. So they backed down and let the British come back. Okay, so the next 100 years or so were chaotic, to say the least. The islands were basically abandoned, then resettled, then abandoned again. But the British did something clever. Before they left the first time, they stuck a plaque there, basically a metal "we were here first" sign. And believe it or not, that little piece of metal is going to be a huge deal later on. I mean, think about it. Both Britain and Spain had much bigger fish to fry. Britain was dealing with the American Revolution, and Spain had Napoleon on their doorstep, not to mention independence movements popping up all over South America. So the islands just sat there, mostly empty. That is until 1833. Britain sails back in, points to that old plaque, and says, see, still ours. And they promptly kicked out a tiny settlement from the brand new Argentina Confederation. So who was in that little settlement? Well, the main guy was this merchant named Louis Vernet, and things went sideways fast. Buenos Aires named him governor, and he took that title seriously. He started seizing American sealing ships. Bad move. The U.S. was not happy. They sent a warship, completely leveled his settlement, and basically rolled out the red carpet for Britain to come back without any opposition. After all that drama, things actually calmed down for a long, long time. For the next century and a half, the islands, now known as the Falklands, were solidly British. The whole economy revolved around sheep farming, and a real community started to grow. But that whole time, Argentina never forgot. For them, the islands were Las Malvinas, and their claim was always there, just simmering under the surface. So yeah, for more than 100 years, this dispute was just kind of a low-level grumble. But then we hit the early 1980s, and in Argentina, you get this perfect storm of a terrible economy and political chaos. And suddenly, that simmer is about to become a full-on violent boil. Okay, so here's the setup in Argentina. The economy is in the toilet, people are super unhappy with the military government, and the guy in charge, General Galtieri, needs a distraction, fast. So he pulls a classic move from the dictator's playbook, start a patriotic war to get everyone to rally around the flag. And his target, you guessed it, the Falkland Islands. Now, the Argentine government thought this was a sure thing. They looked at Britain, saw they were having their own money problems, and noticed they'd been cutting back their military in the South Atlantic. They figured, there's no way they'll fight back. Oh boy, was that a massive miscalculation. They completely forgot to factor in who was running Britain at the time. And that leader was, of course, Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady. I mean, dura como el metal, hard as metal. This was not a person who backed down from anything. So when Argentina invaded on April 2nd, 1982, her response was immediate. It was tough, and it meant one thing, war. And when I say immediate, I mean it. Britain scrambled a massive naval task force. We're talking over 100 ships and sent it steaming 8,000 miles south. They slapped a total exclusion zone around the islands, and just like that, the world was watching.
A war was about to break out in one of the most remote places on Earth. This thing blew up into a huge international deal pretty quickly, with countries all over the globe picking sides. Most of South America, unsurprisingly, backed Argentina. But the big one was the USA. After trying to play peacemaker for a minute, they ultimately sided with their old ally, Great Britain, and started sending them critical military support and intel. So phase one of the war really happened at sea. And the key moment, the real turning point, was when a British submarine sank the Argentine cruiser, the General Belgrano. Now, this was super controversial. It happened outside the exclusion zone Britain had set up. But the effect was undeniable. The entire Argentine Navy basically went back to port and stayed there for the rest of the war. Just like that, Britain controlled the seas. With the Argentine Navy gone, the battle moved to the skies. And this was a brutal, brutal air war. The Argentine pilots were incredibly brave, flying right to the absolute limit of their fuel to attack the British fleet. They did a lot of damage, sinking several ships. For weeks, the skies over the South Atlantic were just a chaotic battleground, with British Sea Harriers trying to fight off these relentless attacks. Okay, so with control of the sea and the air finally tipping in their favor, the British were able to start the ground war. On May 21st, troops hit the beaches at a place called San Carlos, and then began the long, hard slog across this freezing, boggy, absolutely miserable terrain, making their way towards the capital, Stanley. The ground war was just a series of incredibly tough fights. What really made the difference, time and again, was the training and equipment of the British forces. Even when they were outnumbered, they managed to win key battles like the one at Goose Green. Eventually, they fought their way to the mountains surrounding Stanley, took the high ground, and on June 14th, the Argentine forces, totally surrounded, had no choice but to surrender. So, the surrender on June 14th ended the fighting. But, and this is the crucial part, it didn't end the conflict. Not by a long shot. The war cast this incredibly long shadow, leaving behind a really complicated and painful legacy for everyone involved. I mean, just look at the cost. In only 74 days, over 900 people lost their lives. And the islands themselves were literally scarred by the war. Thousands upon thousands of landmines were left behind, a deadly legacy that people are still dealing with today. And, what about the people who actually live there? That's a huge piece of this puzzle. In 2013, they held a referendum to decide their own future. The result? 99.8% voted to stay a British overseas territory. You really can't get much clearer than that. But wait, there's more. Just to make things even more complicated, they've recently discovered huge amounts of oil in the waters around the islands. So now it's not just about history and pride, it's about money. A lot of money. And that just raises the stakes for everyone, making a final solution even harder to find. So when you look at the Falklands or Las Malvinas, you're looking at a story about history, about national pride, about who was there first. And now you have to throw a massive pile of oil money on top of it all. Which leaves us with the big question, right? Is there any way for these two countries to finally put this to rest? Or is this conflict just going to be frozen in time, forever unresolved in the middle of the South Atlantic?